You can live a life full of love and light if you just let the Spirit guide you. It's the remedy where you'll find peace, but you must let the Spirit guide you.
Who made y'all priests?
What's up, world? This is Fafore.
What's going on, good people? This is Osuen. Welcome back to the Who Made Yall Priests podcast, where we talk about our spiritual journeys, our everyday life experiences, and the issues of the time from the perspective of two people who just happen to be priests. Fafore, what's going on, man? I see you got on your Kappa Alpha Psi, man. You got on your nail year today, huh?
Yeah, I figured for the topic that we're talking about today, I might as well rep a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Get my money's worth.
I feel you, man. You know, I didn't go to college, I didn't play, so I started to come on here in a red bandana just to show some type of solidarity. I was like, nah, man, let me not do that, man. This ain't the time or the place for that, man.
Hey, you should have. You know what I'm saying? You should have represented, man. Hey, listen, we are here. We preach for the people, man. We here for everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, people who went to college, people who didn't, people Kappa Alpha Psi, people in Omega Sci-Fi, people who are Fruittown Pyrus and Rolling 60 Crips. Like, we here for everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Right. We preach for the people, man.
Yeah, we taking it back to how churches used to be when they be like, come as you are, and they meant that for real.
For real.
Yeah.
I ain't got
That's
nothing to
what we
wear.
on.
But I ain't got nothing to wear to church, man. Come as you are, man. Come just like that, man. You straight.
Right.
Yeah, man. What's been going on with you, man?
Man, the thing that I can, I guess, in a way appreciate about the American news, that it always gives us something. And here lately in the news, President Joe Biden steps down.
Right.
He says, you know what? On second thought, I do be tripping. On second thought, I do need to just sit down and chill. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna put my weight up behind Kamala Harris and let her go ahead and run. So we have a new Democratic nominee. I think, and the reason why I say I think is because I don't know when this has ever happened before or the last time it's happened. Is that all that needs to happen? Like he says she good, she gets the nod, or is there some kind of a process? Because what if they pull a quick one and be like, yo, nah, we want her or him to run. So I don't know how that works.
It is a process. The Democratic National Convention has to give the nod to the person that they want to put on the ticket. So far, Kamala has gotten the nod. The Democrats now are trying to get Joe Biden to step down while he's in office. Now, this is something that I thought would happen from the jump. Like, I felt like Joe Biden, even though Donald Trump is real close to Joe Biden in age, I feel like I saw the mental decline in Joe Biden early. Like, he was already suffering from whatever he's suffering from.
I don't even mean to laugh, but right.
Yeah, he been had that. That's not new. So I was already of the belief that at some point in the middle of his term that he's going to step down, he's going to pass away or something, and Kamala is going to be president of the United States. Now they're trying to get Joe Biden to step down, making Kamala the incumbent president. Now, if history is any guide as to what happens when there's an incumbent president, usually the incumbent president wins. So I think that's kind of the play right now, is to get Joe Biden to step down midterm, making Kamala the president, and also running against Donald Trump as the incumbent president. But yeah, it's a lot going on right now. You got a lot of people theorizing that even though Michelle Obama says she wants nothing to do with the presidency, that she may take a run as well, because Kamala can't beat Donald Trump, but Michelle Obama likely can.
I don't know. I don't think either one of them can be. You know, I usually don't do this, right? You know, but I went ahead, I divined on it. I asked E5, like, who was better for the American people? And E5 said Kamala.
Mm.
Then I asked if she had the best interest of the people at heart. And E5 said no.
Mm. I think her history bears that out, right? I mean, Black people, we got a very short memory. We forget so many things as long as people are talking to us good. As long as
Right.
you know, if
Right.
people are talking to us good, man, we'll forget what you said yesterday, what you did last year, what you did 10 years ago. We'll forget about all of that. You know, we talking about uh Black women saying that they will vote for Kamala simply based on her being a Black woman. But she doesn't identify as a Black woman. Now, what's crazy is that Black women will say she's a Black woman. She denies the identification as a Black woman, but Black women will say she's a Black woman nevertheless. But then you get into the transgender conversation, and there's a whole different side of the fence. As you know, we have to acknowledge people how they identify. She identifies as an Asian, and I've heard her say that out of her own mouth, that she's an Asian. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what to do with that. I don't know
Right. Right.
what Black women will do with that. So what are your thoughts on that? About, well, what are your thoughts about voting simply on identity politics, simply on her being so-called Black?
What you just now said is that we have very short-term memories. Every major Black movement was brought down by somebody who was Black.
Mm.
You know, people who shot, Malcolm X. You know, people who infiltrated different organizations like the Black Panther Party. They were Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm not sure if genetically she's Black. Her mom is Indian, South Indian. Her father is Jamaican, but from what I understand, he's Jamaican, but an immigrant from India to Jamaica. Because a
Right.
long time ago, Asians, Chinese people specifically, and Indians went to Jamaica because they were inexpensive labor after slavery ended,
Right.
right? And so people just assume, man, Jamaica is Black, which it is mostly Black, but you got to look more into the history to understand that a lot of Asians came over, or excuse me, a lot of Chinese and a lot of Indians, because technically they're both Asians, but came over as cheap labor.
Right.
Like there was a long time ago, I think it was like American Idol. There was a woman who was Jamaican, but I do think she has some African ancestry though.
Mm.
But she had a very Chinese phenotype, right? And I think that was the first time people started to realize, like, oh, it's not just Black people over there in Jamaica.
Right.
So I remember when she got selected as the vice president, she was asked about passing legislation that specifically benefited Black people, and she said she was not going to be a part of passing legislation that was just for Black people.
Right.
But then they passed legislation that was just for Asians, or legislation that was just for LGBTQIA plus. Oh, I got that. And so people will say, well, she's not for us. Well, the law of reciprocity, I think, is in effect here, because I would like to know of that $81 million that she raised in 24 hours. I wonder how much of that came from Black people.
Mm.
And if I had to guess, I would say very little. And if we're not voting with our dollars, you might as well just not vote.
Right.
Because if you're not paying, there's no reason for them to do anything for us specifically. I guarantee you, LGBTQIA plus communities donated a lot of that $81 million.
Mm-hmm.
Corporations, because they wanted their interests protected, was a big part of that $81 million.
Right.
Again, I'm sure Black people, very, very little.
Yeah.
And that's why we get basically nothing. Whatever we get as far as legislation is things that was passed for other people. We just so happen to qualify. To be perfectly honest,
Right. It benefits us indirectly, huh?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just like how all of us, or 94% of us, were Republicans before the Depression, and then when all these social programs came through for poor whites, we just so happened to qualify, and we said, "Hey, we're going over to the Democratic Party,"
right?
Because they giving out that paper. So,
I saw you talking to somebody in the DMs that he's a Democrat, I assume, and more than likely votes Democrat. I know he said that he's part of a union, and the Democrats look fondly upon unions, and Republicans, conservatives, not so much. I'm a part of a union myself. And I just got one of the circulars that they sent out, and they was talking about how the union, my particular union, and the Biden administration came together to turn back on one of the nuclear plants up somewhere up north. So the union dollars are definitely going to the Democratic Party. The LGBTQIA plus dollars are definitely going to the Democratic Party. So all of the groups, that you can think of, pretty much are all pointing their dollars toward the Democratic Party. Kamala,
right.
I don't know. I don't know if she can beat Donald Trump.
I don't know either. But to go back to that conversation in the DMs, though, the person is Black. He's a part of a union, and he's in the LGBT community.
Right.
When he was talking about who he was backing, if you remember, he said nothing about being Black.
Right.
It was about being in the LGBT community and being in the union.
Right.
Right? Now, and I tell people this all the time, I was 2 classes away from having a bachelor's degree in women's studies. I took on women's studies as my minor because I wanted to see oppression through a different lens.
Mm.
The one thing that it showed me is that as I was taking different classes, I saw how the women's movement, or the feminist movement groups, came to Black women. And Black women was like, no, I'm Black first. Fast forward years later, we're no longer Black first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's we're all these other things first. And so this is why the quote unquote Black vote doesn't matter anymore, is because we're going to get your vote because you're gay, or we're going to get your vote because you're just a Democrat, or we're going to get your vote because you're in the union, or something of that nature, right?
Right.
It's no more because of you are Black first. That probably doesn't happen in other communities. Other communities probably are race first, And that's why we see a stronger community. Now, as a priest, I say that I'm a Pan-African because I don't believe that we can come together as one unified group unless we have the various strong communities. And right now, in the Black African, whatever you want to call it, community, we don't have a strong group. And because of that, we can't actually be a beneficial part of the world family until we become a strong group.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, it's kind of disheartening, but that's kind of where we've been for decades now, a couple generations, and I don't really see that becoming any different. Like I said, especially as these other communities start to gain strength. One thing that I know about people is people like to be a part of a winning team. And if
Right.
you Black and you gay, then gay is more of a powerful unit, more of a powerful community. That makes sense. They're going to pick that way.
Mhm.
One of the last things that I'll say about the politics here is people make the argument of, I am going to vote for the lesser of two evils. I feel like people need to understand that when you say that you are going to vote for the lesser of two evils, what you are saying is that I am going to vote for evil.
Mhm.
And when you do that, then what you get as a result of that is karma, and not the positive kind.
Right. Yeah. So what we got today, man? I see you. Like I said, I see you with your nail you on, man. You repping right now. You almost 50 years old, and you still. That's a beautiful thing, though. As
I'll
as
show you.
as long as you've been out of college, you still cling to that brotherhood. That says a lot about how much of an influence that community, that body had on you and on many other people. So yeah, that's a beautiful thing, man. So what we got for the people today, man?
Absolutely. So today we're going to talk about the commonalities between African spirituality and Black Greek letter organizations. So we got a couple of brothers who are going to come in and they're going to share their background, their wisdom, and their experience, and lend that to the conversation. So let's
Okay.
get into it.
Aboro Boye Owls, how y'all doing?
Boy, boy, yay.
Black Coast,
Welcome
Go
to it.
Boom.
What's going on with y'all, man? How y'all living in y'all respective cities? So you in the Northeast, right, Baba Buku?
Yes, yeah.
And what about you, Baba?
I'm based in Atlanta.
Atlanta. Oh, okay. So you in the South, so you getting some of this heat, huh?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
You getting some of this heat, man. So we're gonna ask both of y'all to introduce yourselves to the family. We'll start with you, Baba Joel. Introduce yourself to the family. Tell us what you do. Tell us about yourself. Tell us how you got here.
Okay. Greetings. My name is Joel Powell. Baba Shango Bimi. Onifa De Ifa Wahimi Fahimi Akambe Joel Powell Mobrunda. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a professional musician, bassist to be more specific. Um, I'm just thankful to be here. It's been a definite journey getting to this place, but through a lot of study, through a lot of ups and downs and ins and outs, here we are, taking this journey even further, this journey of expansion. Originally from Albany, Georgia, so Southwest Georgia, a small town. Moved to Atlanta back in like 2006, pursuing music full time. And it's been a heck of a journey. I can say I learned a lot coming here. Got exposed to a lot of information. Even my journey towards Ifa. Um, and yeah, I think that's just a nice basic run around of who I am in general. Yes.
That's it.
Baba Buku, talk to us.
All right, all right. So here in Baltimore, Maryland, originally from the Philadelphia area, but for the people who know the area, Wilmington, Delaware, and people out of Camden, New Jersey. but been in Baltimore since 1987 until now. Graduate of Morgan State University. Serial entrepreneur at one particular time, investing in real estate. Barber by trade, had different salon concepts and so forth, franchises. But yeah, somebody says, "What do you do?" I say it all sometimes. Right? Also excited about there's a nonprofit that I'm putting together now, particularly for the sisters regarding re-entry into the community. So looking to offer our sisters some support in that way as well. So just happy to be of service to the collective, and happy to be with y'all.
We appreciate it. And when you talk about re-entry, are you talking about getting out of prison?
Absolutely.
Right. So talk to us a little bit more about that. What you got going on with the re-entry program?
So I acquired a property some time ago in one of the neighborhoods here in Baltimore. And a lot of my work, the majority of my work is with sisters. It came up, in my Shefa. It also shows in my Itefa as well. Just working with sisters. And for instance, I would say 90%, 95% of my spiritual clients are women. And so what can we do to support them, coming back into the community? There are a lot of barriers to reentry. So we're talking about job readiness, also exposing them as well to, or introducing them to some of the more atypical modes of healing, acupuncture, herbs, getting them into a space where we can get into some non-traditional awareness of healing outside of what the mainstream has to offer. So it's in the fledgling stage now, still in the construction stage, but really excited about, getting that moving.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. I served 10 years in prison, and it was a difficult adjustment coming home and things seeming like it's moving so fast. Like you're not used to things out here, the different phones, the different buildings when you come home, and how things are done differently now. So yeah, that'll be a beautiful thing, man. There are a lot of people that need that adjustment, that buffer between leaving prison and getting back out here into the free world. So that's a beautiful thing, man. Keep us abreast of what happens with that.
Thanks, man.
As is customary on the Who Made Yall Priests podcast, we talk about our spiritual journeys. The people already know about my journey and our Fafore's journey. So, Baba Joel, tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey. What different spiritual systems did you come through, if any, and what led you to stop here in the Ifa or Risha tradition?
Okay, cool. I always make the comment that everyone in my family is either a preacher, a teacher, or a musician, or a combination of them all. So coming from a heavily church family, a lot of people in my family are pastors, preachers. Uh, it's funny, my mother, God rest her soul, she was into Christian education. My aunt was into Christian counseling. They all taught at a local seminary in my hometown. So just, very staunch, Baptist, Southern Baptist people. Um, and I'm definitely the one that stood out a little bit as far as my philosophy, kind of marching the beat of my own drum and my Aquarius nature. Um, I matriculated, just doing music and teaching Sunday school. I participated in a lot of things in the church up until probably late college as I was graduating. Right before I moved to Atlanta, I was still, pretty into the church even then. I was definitely going through a transition probably later in college because I started to look into transcendental meditation. I started looking into, maybe the philosophies like Rosicrucianism, what I'm saying? Because they can be there's a basic offset and offshoot of Christian theology as far as like the alternative gospels of Jesus Christ, getting into, how Jesus was able to walk on water, learning about the mysticism and magic. And I say actually, late in college, I changed, it's only official when you change your status on Facebook. So I changed my status from Christian to Christian mystic when I was in college, and from there moving to Atlanta, like I said, getting exposed to a lot more material, a lot more books, a lot more reading. Reading, the books of Dr. Clark, reading, Jake Diop, reading, just numerous things. So many different books that I got exposed to. I really got into a study of Egypt. What I'm saying, understanding more of the symbolic structure, not Egyptology as it's taught, but really looking into the science of what was really being said, seeing it on another level. And from there, it kind of paired with me experimenting with psychedelics. So I started, experimenting with mushrooms and so on and forth like that. I would see hieroglyphs where on the crown chakra, it'd be images of mushroom, people carrying mushroom baskets. And getting into that science, listening to Baba Kalenda Iyi up in Detroit with going into the plant medicines and so forth. And through my first initial experiences with mushrooms, it definitely is everything that they talk about that we're supposed to understand. You really start to know once you get into that space. It's definitely almost, I dare say, alternate universe or alternate experience for what we usually experience on Earth. And that in itself, seeing the colors, feeling the feelings that I felt, the emotions, dealing with even personal trauma during those times. Because at that time, I had lost my mother. I lost my mother back in 2011. So all this kind of compiled, doing all these studies, learning about the afterlife or different forms of understanding on the afterlife and how it affects us. How can we communicate with that other side? Having visions, having dreams. And from there, with the psychedelics, of course, I started to question really if all this happened in Egypt and we have all these structures that show us, that it was here. Where did the magic go? Where did the power go? Where did the wisdom go? And my study led me to Ifa. I mean, happenstance. I met my Luo Baba Femi via a reading with my now wife back in 2012, and in hearing his journey was very similar to mine. Having been a Sunday school teacher, having been someone who was kind of pushed and groomed to be more of a pastor or a preacher, a minister in some form of fashion, and seeing that commonality in our stories, and also sitting in the mat with the Bible out for the first time, and he's telling you all these things about yourself that you like. How does this dude know this stuff about me? And that correlating with my own journey and looking for where is his magic, where is his power, it brought me to Ifa. As far as one having the different mechanisms, whether it be herbal medicine, whether it be divination, um, the power of our spoken word, just all these factions that I had been studying previously in other sciences and other places, but just seeing it kind of codified, culturally speaking, having a connection to the continent. And yeah, that's kind of why I stayed. I mean, this walk in Ifa has been something that has been very expansive in the fact that it doesn't block me off from further study. It doesn't block me from looking into this and looking into that. If anything, this is a code of conduct that I live by. This is a science, because I can truly say I'm much more of a scientific mind than a religious person. I mean, religion was never really my thing as far as just doing things because people tell you. I mean, even my experience, even in Greek life, just I was always the one that really didn't follow group think. I tend to think on my own, and if it makes sense, and the science of wisdom of Ifa kind of just made sense to me. So that's why I am where I am, and why I continue to study where I study, and also just seeing, and now working with clients, seeing the power and seeing how things have moved in other people's lives using these tools that I've used to, better my own life. So yeah, that's my journey.
Ashe, Ashe.
Sure.
I'm glad to hear about the Rosicrucianism. I myself came through Rosicrucianism, studying the Rosicrucian philosophy. I actually got a chance to join one of the Perneos down here in Houston, so I got a chance to actually fellowship with some people, learn some things from some people. I still have all of my Rosicrucian books. It's a beautiful philosophy. I just felt like there wasn't enough Black African praise in Rosicrucianism. I felt like they did everything they could to separate Black people from Egypt, even though that's where they say that they got all of their information and teachings from. So the teachings were beautiful, the philosophy was beautiful, but when you start to read the history and them trying to make you believe that the Egyptians were at the very most mixed, yeah, I had to kind of find my way away from the Rosicrucian thing, and like you say, by happenstance, I found Baba Femi. Baba Buku, talk to us, man. What about your spiritual journey? What different systems or things like that did you come through to get to Ifa?
Well, it started out, I mean, it probably was a typical beginning for most folks. Um, Mine was Christian background. In the area that I lived in, Islam was also prevalent as well. So if Christianity was 1A, Islam was 1B. But I had been like later, probably in my earlier 20s, I started to become involved in, what was called then the conscious community. So this is like in the earlier 90s. So all of the philosophy that you can imagine, just like my Beji said, some of the great scholars, the great warrior scholars, if you will, that imparted their wisdom on us through their works, their speeches, a part of all of those things. So red, black, and green was heavy. Now, didn't really move too much to a spiritual practice at that time. If someone had asked me and said, "Hey, brother, well, are you religious or are you spiritual?" I would have said spiritual, but there was no real underpinning for that. I just knew that I loved my people, loved my community, and that was, enough for me. But fast forward, I want to be mindful about how I say this. But there was a need for me to advocate for a family member that couldn't advocate for themselves. And it became apparent, as a dear friend said to me, say, "Hey, brother, you don't have a material problem, you got a spiritual problem. You need to go ahead and holler at these people." Now, what was interesting is that there was a need to create a sort of barrier or separation between the Baltimore spiritual community at that time, what my needs were in terms of advocacy for this family member. So the person told me to holler at Chief Edway. Now I had known Chief Edway for this is the reference I always give for people who have heard me speak about this before. They're gonna laugh and they can probably say it along with me. How long I known her is I saw Tyson Holyfield too at her house, right? Just for a reference in terms of clock and calendar. So that's a long time. But I wasn't aware that she was into the practice, and of course, connected to OIDSI. I'm going there for advocacy for this family member, and through the course of it, Spirit was like, "Oh, and where have you been? We've been waiting for you." I'm like, "Y'all waiting for me?" Right? But the thing that was interesting about it was that I had a comedic reading before, a long time ago. But at the time, the specificity of the reading, the veracity of the reading was such that everything else was so clear. It was such a through line, between what my experience was and what was being, divined and discussed, that I was just, I said, I'm going to be obedient to this. If they're saying that they write about everything else, let me go ahead and come in out of the cold. And so it was obedience. There was no situation where I had set out to be an Ifa practitioner or priest for that matter. It was obedience. And so here we are. So 2014 was my Ishefa, 2018 Tefa. And of course now, things are obvious, but you can't see what you can't see. You don't know what you don't know. And we give thanks for people who had a capacity and the patience to help us, walk into what we're supposed to be walking into, reminding us about who and what we are. So I give thanks for that.
Ashe. Uh, to me, that question right there is the most important part of the whole conversation that we have. In anytime we have people on, is that I always love hearing how people navigated their journey to get to E5. That's my favorite part in every conversation. So that was beautiful. Thank y'all for sharing that. So for the topic of today, so man, several months ago, I get a phone call from one of our God sisters, and they were like, I got a topic that you guys should talk about on the pod. And I was like, what is it? It was like about similarities between African spirituality and Black Greek letter organizations. And I said, okay, let me think about that. It wasn't an immediate, oh yeah, let's do it, right? And so I was like, let me think about it. About a week or so later, Osuen and myself, we had a reading to do for someone who happens to be one of my frat brothers, happens to be one of my chapter brothers. And so part of the reading, it was talking about ritual came up in there, as a part of spiritual practice. And he practices Islam. He does not practice Ifa. So I was like, okay. I was the one that was, going over the reading with him. So I'm like, okay, how am I sell this concept of ritual for somebody who doesn't practice what we practice? For us, it's second nature, right? And so I am going over, the reading, and I'm coming to the end. I'm coming to the part that talked about the ritual, and he asked me a question, and I'm like, all right, let's see how he takes to this. And as soon as I had that thought in my mind, I hear, derived from the old Dutch C words, fellowshippers, meaning men of destination and purpose. Fraternity is defined variously, essentially as a brotherhood characterized by rituals, idealism, sociality, and altruism. Rituals are a system of rites and ceremonies. I'm like, yo, online, we learned this piece of information called Fraternity Defined. And in there, it talks about the importance of ritual. And so I go through the reading, I say what Spirit said, and he was with it. And then I made the mention of, online we learned Fraternity Defined and talked about the importance of ritual, this, that, and the nature. And he was with it. And it was from that moment that I said, yeah, this would be a dope idea, and it's definitely something that we need to discuss. So with that, and before I go, I just want to say 24 years off the sands, and boy, I did it like I was back, online. But so my question, and I'm gonna go with Baba Scott to start off this one with. So tell us about what fraternity you in. Take you back to undergrad when you out at a party and somebody see you and they be like, yo, I'm such and such from this chapter. Then you go through your whole spiel. So go ahead and kick it off, Baba Scott. Reintroduce yourself and your affiliation with your fraternity.
All right. So Scott Russian, 4BA 88 Fall, Morgan State University, Bloody Beta Alpha chapter is what they called it. Started out with 13, ended up with 5. Nickname we all had line names. Line name was Dr. Bones, also known as Night Train, also known as Frail, right? Matter of fact, I brought something in so you can see,
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, I was moving recently. I hadn't seen this jacket in years, but I just moved recently, and I remember you told me about the podcast. I said, let me bring that in. Also, got something here. But the way that I got introduced to this lifestyle, uh, my brother, rest in peace, he passed in 2005. He actually pledged Kappa like in the early 80s, but the line got dropped. They got caught, life, life in the trenches. They got caught out there, and so the line got suspended. And I remember being like I must have been like 10 or 11 years old at this point. He was the first one in our family to go to college, and so he brought me in the room, and he showed me uh, what he looked like. Based on the practice. I just put it that way. He showed me some of his injuries, and he said to me, he said, "And if you go to school, if you go to college, you probably gonna want to do the same thing, huh?" I'm like, "Nah." Right, and left the room. I'm like, why did he even show me that? But anyway, it rolled out. It was like, yeah, but brother, he's wild. But I remembered that, never forgot it. And by the way, nukes were pretty prevalent in that area, like the Wilmington, Delaware, Philly. I think you're headquartered in Philly, right? Yeah. So I mean, it
Yep.
was, it always had been a strong presence, of Kappas, in the community, younger brothers, really. But when I started to move through, my academics in school, going to Upward Bound and different programs, and there were some people that were really, influential, at least to me, but I didn't know what their affiliation was. And one day, matter of factly, someone had said, "Yeah, he's an alpha, right?" I'm like, okay, that, some admirable qualities. They had already, visited a strong impact and influence in my life, thus far. Then it was someone else, another person, kind of in a mentorship capacity. He's affiliated as well. Again, I'm not necessarily, trying to move a certain way, but I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So it's like it's starting to cut a certain figure in my mind about what the a I guess the prototype could be for this organization. We know so much more now, but again, at a younger stage, like, oh, these are the people that I'm seeing moving a certain way. And then I remember did pretty well in school academically, and I got a full academic scholarship to Morgan, but they didn't pay for books. And so they said, yeah, you need to go ahead and apply for this. Go ahead and apply for this book scholarship. They'll pay for your books, I think, throughout your college. And it was the Alphas once again. It was funny because, not funny, but it was just bizarre because I was being interviewed by a panel of 7, and one of the people one of the brothers that interviewed me, he was an elder and he was blind, but he was so in tune with everything that was happening that I just remember being like 17, like, and this dude is really present despite what happened. But that was a kind of a bizarre experience. But again, here it is, the Alphas coming to save the day, right? So I get to the campus. Again, not necessarily thinking about pledging, so to speak, but I already had a favorable impression, of the organization. So when I got to Morgan, I saw everybody just like, everybody coming on campus the way we do. You're checking not looking to, but just observation. And then but I did pay attention to the Alphas, and it seemed to be consistent with what I saw out in the community back home. So, one thing led to another, and, eventually went to, I don't know what they call them now. We used to call them smokers. Uh, and, the next thing you know, 1988 fall, black and gold.
I say they still call them smokers. Interest meetings, or smokers, but you still hear smokers. Baba Joel, how about you? Represent for your fraternity.
What up? What up? What up? Joel Powell, 17th dog, Spring, '01, Minor Chi Epsilon. All right, that's Omega Psi Phi, Albany State University. I was the youngest person on the line. Wow, what a day. um, I can say I was damn near groomed to be an Omega, bro. Like straight up. Like my older brother Mel, he's 8 years older than me. He participated in the Little Brother program because we had a very active Little Brother program of Omega Sci-Fi in Albany, Georgia. A lot of gentlemen from my church, people I'd grown up with, just people I looked up to my entire life. And after my brother did it, being so much older, I came into middle school and it was like, hey, I think I want to do the Little Brother program too. So I got involved in Omega Sci-Fi Little Brothers program in my 6th grade year. And I was in the Little Brothers program all the way directly through, I mean, yeah, till I crossed, literally. Um, I won the the talent hunt. This is like I was just thoroughly immersed in. I always did a lot of activities, but I was a saxophone player in school, saxophone player and bass, and I won the talent hunt like my 10th grade year. Uh, I was like on the step team my ninth, 10th grade, 11th grade year, so on and so forth. I won the Omega scholarship, so it's like it's just Omega, Omega, Omega. It was like that was it for me. Um, Mostly just because, like I said, the guys that I did look up to at church, super cool guys, very family oriented. I mean, it's like I wasn't looking to be the stereotypical Q dog. You know what I'm saying? What people associate usually with the frat. You know what I'm saying? It's like y'all know my personality. For me to be an Omo Shango, people say I'm the most chill Shango person they ever met because that's my vibe. You know what I'm saying? I know how to get down when it's time to get down, but what I'm saying, I do understand order, I understand process, and so yeah. In looking at the organization, I was already popular. I was already well known. I went to college a year and a half early. In fact, my whole claim to fame back at Albany State was I'm the first dual enrolled presidential scholar. So I won the presidential scholarship and I was able to go in full time, which is a big part of why I was the youngest person online. I started my first college classes in 10th grade and in 11th grade, and then I went in. My senior year was literally my freshman year of college. So I was graduating in 2000, but I crossed in 2001. So literally that whole thing, and it was an interesting time just being so young and impressionable. Because a lot of brothers who were on the line with me had been on the line before that got caught up. So it was definitely some interesting energies, as far as like people disclosing certain things. You know what I'm saying? It's like everybody's trying to keep stuff on the hush. You know how it goes, especially HBCUs when we've had a box on our plot multiple times. You know what I'm saying? So everything's just pretty low key. But yeah, it was a beautiful experience. I can say I grew up a whole lot during the process. I learned a lot about people. That's what I always take from it more than anything. I learned about people. I learned how, and I mean it's good and bad. I saw how some personalities were boosted forward, and people became more of themselves, more confident. But I also saw people that like totally flip mode. You know what I'm saying? They were this totally quiet, timid person, and now they super cute. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just interesting to see that dynamic. um, I believe I did change some too because I mean, in going through those type of processes, you can't help but get a bit more confident. I wouldn't say I was arrogant or cocky, anything like that, but it's like I knew I could handle hardship like a good soldier. You know what I'm saying? And it's just that mindset and that fortitude got me through, got me past the burning sands. I became bosses of the chapter when I was undergrad. Road trip a good bit. It was a beautiful experience. You know what I'm saying? I'm thankful for what I learned from Omega. Um, like I said, just about the strength of my character, the strength of my mind, um, understanding hard work. I was never one that shied away from hard work. My summer job as a child was harvesting watermelons on my grandparents' farm, so that wasn't a problem for me. But just in that, I became more me. I became more defined of who I wanted to be, what I valued. And like as I said earlier, me not being one for group think, it push some people the wrong way sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know if y'all use the phrase GDI, but goddamn individual. It's like that's really what the phrase means. And I could be labeled as that a lot of times because it's like just because everybody do it, you know, that old adage, if everybody jumps off a cliff, you're gonna jump off a cliff too. Not me. You know what I'm saying? If it makes sense, if it look quite appealing, yeah, the cliff might get jumped off of. But I was definitely one that was cool with standing my ground uh, against the fray sometimes, or against, the collective mindset. So, I had my good times, my bad times. You have some people that want to give you extra problems because of that, but I think that was a part of what made me, really stand that much stronger as an individual and as a man. Understanding and realizing so many of those lessons that my father taught me real time, and also moving forward even from that because I joined the Masonic Lodge at 21. So just that continuation of growth and expansion, that continuation of studying, learning about ritual, the mysticism of things, the mysticism of ritual was something that caught my eye initially. And I think that's why, even moving forward in E5, and Scott and I, when we were in Nigeria, kind of talked about like, oh man, I see where they get everything from. They get all this stuff from this, going through that process. And I could literally enumerate through the multiple because as far as the Masonic Lodge, I'm in the Blue House, but I'm also in consistory, so I've done multiple initiations there, and also the initiation with Omega Psi Phi. And looking at my initiation in Tafar, it's like my head was kind of blown just feeling the ancientness of it, but also seeing that it was kind of like a full circle moment in a sense of this is what we were looking for when we did join these organizations and tap into the ritual, understanding the illumination that comes. You know what I'm saying? But all of that is truly symbolic for what we must do as men in our lives. You know what I'm saying? With the Sunday Lodge, the rough ashley becomes the smooth stone, and coming from the doghouse and now becoming an Omega man, this progression. I mean, it was very pivotal for me because I was in a very, in being once again the youngest person, it was a very influential time on me, but it gave me the confidence that I did know who I was and that I was somebody already. If anything, this added to me, and if anything, I believe I add to the frat. Um, but it definitely made me solid and much more solid in who I am and who I desire to be and how I want to carry myself forward. So yeah, that was my whole skilo with frat.
I say, Jimmy, legendary Z Tall, Spring 2000, Four Club, Tail Dog, and The Rock. Um, Man, I came into school not knowing anything about fraternities at all. And people would ask if I was interested in a fraternity. I was like, to get jumped, basically to have friends. I'm like, that don't sound cool. Like that sounds like I can't tell my people back at the crib, like, man, I let these dudes do this so I can be like friends with them and hang with them. Like, nah, I'm a pass. And one day, man, I'm a freshman, and it's like we were on quarters. I went to a PWI, a predominantly white institution, and so it's spring quarter, and it's a bunch of us and a friend of mine dorm. We actually grew up together. We from the same city. She went to school there, so we in her dorm room, and it was a Sigma in there, and he was talking about fraternities and everything. The only thing he talked about was pledging. Everything he said was like a pledging horror story, right? Which is the reason why I was like, that does not sound like something cool to do. But it was something about how he was telling the story, and I could feel like, and this is a big dude. Like he played football in the school that he went to before. Well, no, he played football, I think, at the school where he played at Sigma, and then he transferred. And I ended up playing on the NCAA 2K or something like that with him, But he was a big dude, and he was talking about all that they did to him online. But man, you could hear the love and the admiration in his voice, and I left like, well, maybe it's something to this. So I'm gonna look around, I'm gonna see, and I'm at a party one day, and Uh, I mean, it was jumping. It was the party of the year. It was jumping. And next thing I know, I see like the doors of the room the party was in fly open, and all you hear was cat, 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 cat. I'm like, what? And then the Red Sea just parted, and you see the Noops start stepping from outside the party, and they come all the way in through. These people had parted and got around, and they had some boys online, and that's when they came out. And I ran around that party. I found my boy Mike, and I said, "Yo, I'm doing that." And he became my Sans. And so, we played. It was a beautiful experience. A beautiful experience, man. I got stories for days, man, for them 17 weeks. I said it was a great experience. I don't know if it's, I'll probably call it slavery. You can call it colonization, or maybe just a lack of identifying with our ancient ancestral traditions. But at some point, we were taken away from our traditions, and therefore we lost like a coming of age type of experience for men and women, for that matter. And for me, pledge and a fraternity was that for me. Like it was like my coming of age, you know. And there's a lot of things that I learned online that didn't really resonate with me, like the depths of what it meant, until I became an adult. So talk to Baba Joel, talk to us a little bit about that, and the idea of the coming of age type of experience. And we can tie that to African spirituality. How was pledging for you in that regard?
It was one of the most. I mean, pledging itself is difficult, but it's like literally my class load was stupid that semester too. So it was just a tough, mentally grinding. It seemed like it was nonstop, just because it really was nonstop. Just so many nights lacking sleep. Having to do this, having to do that, but still having to try to maintain a scholarship too. And I, I mean, simple stuff with college. It made me definitely get much better with my time management because you got some real pressure on you to get stuff done within a certain time limit. Um, I did have certain brothers that, like I said, it was 19 of us. So, I mean, it was one of those things where it was long enough where that was still somewhat subsets within the line. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, okay, these five brothers probably played football together. These brothers played baseball together. It's like me and one of my closest LBs, we were the youngest. So we linked up. And then me and one of my other LBs I'm super close with, we're from the similar area, both were in the music, just those kind of things. And so you find your support system, definitely. Um, and I think, like I said, because mindset has always been something big to me, I naturally attract the people who have a certain mindset about it. I feel I was more attracted to people who were growing and evolving, but not letting the personification of the organization rule their lives. That's just me. You know what I'm saying? Different people, different strokes, different folks. But I think that's something I found value in because in understanding what some of the brothers have been through before on my line, I was kind of settled where I'll take some things within reason. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like the mindset you had, but it was almost like it has to be to a certain point within reason. If stuff, because, there have been injuries, people losing their hearing, people losing, what I'm saying? I'm a musician. I was in band, what I'm saying? All that stuff. So I just had to kind of balance within myself. I can't say what I was willing to do because, like they say never because you just might. And that was a lot of situations where it's like, I never do that. I never. Yeah, right. You in the heat, you in the pit. You got to get it done. You'll get it done. Especially like I said, during that time period, just made me more solid. It made me much more conscious of those people around me, really understanding support systems, really understanding what I was made of too. You know what I'm saying? Because certain challenges will make you doubt yourself, but you see it through. You know what I'm saying? You get through to the other side of a situation or other side of a challenge or, something, just the memorization of stuff, getting called random, you know, it's just a lot. But I can say overall and looking in retrospect, like I said, even now, I don't regret any of it because of who I've become because of it. I know who I am now. The strength of my personality, the strength of my mind is definitely, partially attributed to that. So yeah, that's what I gathered from that space, that time. It's definitely a coming of age. It's definitely the boys to men. You know what I'm saying? Because you come in kind of infantile in your mindset, and then you really are dealing with men. You're dealing with grown men, not just your pro fights, but other brothers that come, that's not on the yard that really challenge you. And you know what I'm saying? Call you on your stuff. And I mean, in love, they'll sometimes pull you to the side to really give you encouragement and wisdom as well. But you know what I'm saying? It's like you got to be on point. You have to deliver. You have to perform. It's like that. Last days go having an excuse for stuff is gone. You know what I'm saying? You got some serious consequences, repercussions because of such. And it's not just you, it's you and everybody else on this line. So you know what I'm saying? If I don't know something, you don't know something. If I know it, you know it, vice versa. You know what I'm saying? Working together to get stuff done, getting all our assignments so we don't flunk out of school. It's just, it definitely built a level of camaraderie that I had never experienced before. Uh, and I have an older brother, but I think it was just different because of the age difference. My brother was 8 years older than me. So having people who, especially when you get into the trenches of road tripping and, people challenging you here and there and all that kind of stuff, it's like you see that you really have this crew that, do or dies really for you and with you. And I had never experienced that before. You know what I'm saying? So that was something very new. I mean, outside of family, blood, kind of sanguine family, but experiencing that and understanding that that was almost actually, especially with the community service stuff that we did, that was also a first time of seeing other young brothers, you know what I'm saying, really reinvesting in the people around us, you know what I'm saying, thinking a little bit more selflessly. I mean, this is of course after line. This is not so much while we on line, but understanding, that once you represent something or put on a certain, garb or certain letters, you represent an idea. You know what I'm saying? You are that representation to so many other people. So it makes you that much more mindful how you conduct yourself. You know what I'm saying? It made me more mindful of who I was and who I want to be, how I want to be viewed upon, and being very definitive and understanding that through perseverance and through hard work, I can have whatever I wanted, because the pledge process shows you that. You know what I'm saying? You can literally have what you want if you really support forth the time, dedication, hard work, the hardships, putting up with the disappointments at times. But it makes you call upon a spirit within yourself that, is damn near unstoppable. And you really don't know it exists until you're put in those pressurized situations where, as with coal, it becomes a diamond. You know what I'm saying? That pressure, that heat, that pressure, makes you, man, it opens your eyes, makes you much clearer with your cognition, makes you flow, it's because you're not thinking. You know what I'm saying? When you have to memorize that stuff, you're not thinking. You can't be thinking. You know what I'm saying? And I use those same philosophies even now where I know what I know. What I don't know, I yield to. You know what I'm saying? I'm always willing to learn, willing to grow, willing to expand. But the things that I do know, I'm pretty sure of. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was something that I did gain from that experience as far as just being more settled in who I am and my thoughts on life, my thoughts on even existing during that time because it makes you question so much. Like why? What is the point of this? You know what I'm saying? But then seeing how those hardships made us bond so close. You know what I'm saying? Having the stories with LB, not to the day we talk about stuff that happened then, to laugh about it, and you see where we are in regards to how we've grown and developed from those days and those times. I really value those things and I really value those experiences. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Baba Scott, what about you?
Similar, similar experience in the process, but I would like to kind of. I know that you asked us to kind of tie it into ATR with the process, and what I kind of was getting when we married it to, at least when we're talking about the online process, not the organizational things, because it's something I would like to go into there. But it's kind of like this cycle of cultural ritual and tradition and how it feeds itself, right? It's that way in the organization. It's that way in the frat sororities. It's that way in the ATRs. And so what I was kind of thinking about was how the ritual process online kind of puts you in this position of like the Orisha on the hero's journey. And so your process is like living the patiki, the experiences that you have, going through whatever challenges, whether real, imagined, manufactured, or organic. There's this thing that has you with this hero's journey. I hate to Hellenize it, but this idea of there are some things that are expected, some things that are not. You come across this thing that's a challenge now, and how it transforms you, supposed to transform you when you get to the other side. And now what's your perspective? So it should be different than when you came through the door. The same thing with our practices as well for ATRs. There is now with the ATR, of course, with our rituals, portals are being open and other things. Ain't no portals getting open, for the frats and sororities that I'm aware of. But even with the process, with the pledging process with the frats and sororities, you're kind of introducing, or the physical quotient is being introduced to simulate or stimulate catharsis, right? The same way that spirit already works through ritual. Much like when they talk about in the military, talk about how weakness is pain leaving the body. What's the thing that you introduce, or what's the thing that gets introduced that puts you in a position to have a different perspective? By the way, by no means am I an apologist for anything that people might think is untoward in the process. I'm just giving you what the experience and what really happened. But the catharsis, the transformation, is what we're getting at in that process with the expectation of having something new. So something new, or something that's transformed, so to speak. So if you're at your Q, in Omega, Ife is Howard University. If you're an Alpha, it's Cornell or Howard, depending on how you want to look at it. Indiana University for the noobs. But it all can be tied together philosophically, because ritual in general just has similar components to begin with. No matter what you're doing, there's a certain beginning and a certain outcome that we're expecting coming through. Yeah, so that's what I have for that. But if I would like to, at a certain point, not gonna hog it up, but there is something I would like to get into historically that I think is significant about the similarities and how these organizations came to be and what their function is.
It's something that you kind of touched on a little bit, Baba Scott. With African spirituality, I feel like African spirituality is a part of the conscious community. But for those people in the conscious community, or maybe certain segments of the conscious community, they kind of like to poke at or even talk down on those of us who have pledged, fraternities, right? And, one of the things that you always hear, or one of the criticisms you hear is, you keep calling yourself Greek, you ain't Greek. And when I hear that, it's always either A, you didn't go to college, or B, you are being willfully ignorant. Because the only thing that's Greek about Black Greek letter organizations is the name. And I can speak specifically for Kappa Alpha Psi. That's the only thing that's Greek about it. And I'll let you get more into detail, Baba Scott, about the commonality between all. But we were all all our founders was in a space where they found themselves in an area where there was a lot of struggle, and they were trying to find unity among a common group, right? And we kind of assimilated with what we saw around us, which is this Greek life, like this existed, right? There was this thing where you had like-minded people form in organizations that they call, Greek letter organizations or Greek life. And we were kept outside of that. So we said, we're going to start our own thing. And the thing that would frustrate me about these people in the conscious community, I was like, you guys even are assimilating a lot of ways into the popular culture, right? And so there's a lot of things that you do that your ancestors didn't do. There's a lot of ways in which you react to things, that you act, that it is a part of your regular everyday life that your ancestors, if you brought them back from the dead, they would look at you like, what are you doing? That's not what we do. So, Baba Scott, we can start with you, especially because when you were talking about how you came through the conscious movement, how do you view Black Greek letter organizations inside of that conscious community? And what is your, I guess, rebuttal or maybe agreement with, the negativity that gets thrown our way?
It's too reductionist. It's too simple to just say Black Greek. This is. But some of the criticism, I can see where it came from, and I think that it's deserved in certain ways. And here's why. And if you're in the conscious community, then you absolutely revere the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garden, right? Now, when you look at some of the key figures that are in the so-called Boule organization, starting with Sigma Pi Phi, although not collegiate, y'all know the history. When you look at, the makeup of some of these, or of all of the so-called Divine Nine, it was argued that particularly W.E.B. Du Bois, first of all, shamefully at odds, as great as he was, died a Pan-Africanist, but shamefully at odds with Marcus Garvey. Philosophically played the, let's talk about it all, played the, skin politics and all of that craziness, shameful, right? We can't overlook the fact that W.E. Du Bois was a member of Sigma Pi Phi. He was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. Also Mason, so all of the things that get maligned in those spaces. And again, it was stated that W.E.B. Du Bois specifically created these or participated in these organizations to steer so-called upwardly mobile, Black folks away from the Pan-Africanist movement. So I, with my own ears and eyes, bear witness at a lecture from the great ancestor now, Steve Coakley, where he talked about, the Boule organizations and how destructive it was. Whether you buy this or not, we're in those rooms where these legends, Dr. John Hammer Clark speaking, about, the Black. When those types of names, those types of figures who made those types of contributions say a thing, it sticks. But the problem is, with all due respect to those who have said those things, who know far more than I do, I'll speak for myself, there still is the advantage of lived experience, because many of the people who have worn these letters also have been significant contributors to the cause. And again, this is not me trying to be, like, hey, look, great living, I'm not active right now, right? So let's put that out there, right? But we just need to talk about what's real. Kwame Ture, formerly as Stolthy Carmichael, who don't get much more. You don't really contribute too much more, too much greater than that. Carter G. Woodson, again, not collegiate, but I know that Carter G. Woodson was at least a member of Sigma Pi Phi. We go on and on. A lot of the people who were, moving in these, particularly as a response to some of the legal. I wanted to get into that later, but some of the legal cases and things that happened, like Plessy versus Ferguson, some of the civil rights stuff down the line. All of these people were at the vanguard of progressive Black issues, representation, access, accommodations, freedom fighting. Even the Masons, get, particularly Prince Hall pertaining to us. Even you're a Mason, you're an oath taker, and all these things. But Prince Hall was against capturing, trying to put barriers between capturing freedmen and transporting them to slavery. And his imagery was decidedly African. For those, again, I'm not a Mason, so I want to be respectful when I say this. But for those you are, might recognize that the first lodge is called African Lodge Number 1, and it continued with African acknowledgement and imagery until maybe decades after he passed away, and then they changed it to Prince Hall. So I mean, being in positions of advocacy, being in positions of activism, when you look at all of those, the cardinal virtues of these organizations, who could have a problem with that? What's yours? Achievement in every field of human endeavor. One thing, right? Mine was, manly deeds, scholarship, love for all mankind. Forgive me, I know yours is like manhood, brotherhood, perseverance. Forgive me, I can't remember. I know I'm close. You know what I'm saying? But and scholarship, I think, is in there as well. So, I mean, who has a problem with extolling these types of virtues in the community, and who was, in a better position at that time to actually push some things forward? The problem is some of us got elitist. Some of us forgot about the principles under which these organizations were found. It's like once you eat, you already ate. So now we might find ourselves on some BS. And so, that's what, I think was lost. It doesn't mean that all of the organizations, just drifted away, but I think it was an image problem. And I think particularly in the conscious community, when you, or at least the people at the forefront of these organizations are seen as putting a barrier between Pan-Africanist movement, grassroots, causes, it's not going to look good. And it still doesn't, quite frankly, it still doesn't play well. But I don't think that there's enough being done across either aisle to try to understand and try to find the places in which we can be allies, the ways in which we can, solve some things. Because there's a lot of potential on both sides. And you keep working until you get to the point where, all right, well, now we're at an impasse, but what did you accomplish before you got to that point? It's just not enough dialogue between, both sides, so to speak.
Now, I know some of my brothers is going to see this. So, Baba Scott, you was about 98%. It's honorable achievement in every field of human endeavor. I ain't want nobody to catch me in the streets and be like, when you said that, you shook your head, yeah. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to answer for that. But Baba Joel, what about you?
Well, one to bring clarity as well, manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. So, thank you for being so close, though, Scott. Definitely. I feel that looking at, like I said, the initial inspiration for me to even join Omega, a lot of the brothers that I saw were these active people. And so I guess even growing up, I had a distinction in my head. I mean, somewhat a distinction in my head between what I knew, because I really wasn't around the college part of the frat growing up, because once again, these are men who are deacons in my church, men who are on the school board, active in the community, i.e., like you said, Scott, those people who are very pivotal people as far as moving the community forward. And in that, And also, mind you, I didn't necessarily come through the conscious school. I had my exploration, but not as deeply versed, definitely as Scott was. And so, I mean, initially for me, it was just that was all I saw. Initially the positivity, the activity, giving to food drives, clothing drives, activities that are really uplifting the community. Them even working with us as young men, with the Little Brother program, really that outreach. Uh, and that was all I initially associated with Greekdom because that's all I knew. You know what I'm saying? I had never been to college. My parents, like I said, very religious, so I hadn't, I had seen Brother Step before, but not Mardi Gras as we have our real parties. And I think that was the thing that kind of got me because I had this very classical expectation, understanding, but then I came to the college stage. It was like, hold up, oh, this is some different stuff, right here. You know what I'm saying? So that was definitely the adjustment that I had to go through in understanding that is, of course, as we all know, that is just a part of the college Greek experience. You know what I'm saying? I had to deal with that within myself. You know what I'm saying? Understand that more and find my way in that. But yeah, I mean, all I knew about Greek was people who had something positive to do in the community. I didn't see. I mean, that's across the board. You know what I'm saying? I look at my best friend, her father, lifetime Kappa. You know what I'm saying? A lot of my family was actually mixed between Omegas and Alphas. So I was kind of, I was kind of teeter-tottering for a little bit, but I mean, I just, overall Omega won out. But yeah, I mean, my experience literally was that, and coming from a small town, all I saw was those classic principles exhibited more or less throughout the community. So I say, if anything, I was challenged more in the college experience because I saw a difference. I mean, it, we have our times for things, and we still did things officially in the college experience, but I mean, it was definitely a kind of a reckoning for me because that wasn't necessarily, and I think I alluded to that earlier, as far as that wasn't necessarily what I was coming into the organization for. But, I learned to assimilate, and of course, I enjoyed some of the perks of that behavior as well. So I can't be totally mad at it, but even my initial experience was that of a more classic perspective of what Greek life was. Uh, so yeah, that was my experience, and that was what I knew even coming in.
So as y'all can tell, I don't have a whole lot to add to this conversation because I didn't have the benefit of going to college and pledging and things like that. I did have my own sort of coming of age experience. I left from high school and went straight to prison. I didn't get a chance to graduate high school, but that was my coming of age experience. That was my pressure, as you said, Baba Joel, that formed the man that I am today. So I didn't have the benefit that you all had, but still had the coming of age, the experiences that I had that formed me into a new person. So that still was some transformation. But lately in the social media world, there are a lot of people coming out and renouncing their Greek organizations, mainly because of religion, and specifically more Christians are coming out and renouncing their Greek organizations. So, Baba Joel, talk to us a little bit about why you think that is. Why do you think that a lot of Christians are coming out and saying that this is you're oath takers, this is uh, demonism, this is witchcraft, and all of these different things? Why do you think that is?
I think so much of it is still groupthink. They've been told that. I mean, a lot of times through their own analysis and even looking at the personification in the community, that's not necessarily what they see, but because it almost feels like a trend or a newer trend, if anything, because like I've seen some people, come online and usually it's because they're getting into the minutia of things versus the actual practical application. And I can say the same has happened with Masonic lodges as well, thinking that everybody that's a Mason is Illuminati. But I mean, a lot of this just gross misconceptions because people have not usually had direct contact, or it also is it can be alluded to as far as people's personal choices while they were in the organization. I mean, did you participate or do something that you feel was contrary? I don't feel like I ever did anything that was contrary to who I was as a human being and as a man, as a person, the way that my father raised me, as I participated in the frat. So I've never had those issues directly. Um, and even in my view of spirituality, I was never. I don't. Maybe I was just an almost Christian. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't Christian enough to be so to the letter where I saw that it was even an issue. Or, because once again, my pastor was a Sigma. All the deacons were Qs, Alphas, this and this. So it's like there wasn't a divide, and so because of that, it kind of baffles me why this is the situation now. But I mean, in listening to some of the specific arguments that people are making, like you said, the oath taker making an oath other than God, the penalties of different oaths and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's allegory. I mean, and that's the thing. I guess in coming from a family that was very Masonic, I understood. Everything is a veil of allegory. It's principles, ethics, and morals that are veiled in allegory. So I mean, yes, these are the stories that are utilized, but it's not like to the letter. And I think that's why I never had that problem with renunciation or anything like that. But I don't know. I mean, that was definitely my understanding from, and like I said, and just growing up with so much of that around me, it never seemed like it was a conflict of interest or a conflict within that because I saw so much of the. There, as I think back, it's like a vast majority of the church I grew up with was Greek. So I mean, it's just it's a dichotomy in my particular mind, just because of how I was raised and how I was introduced to it, and even going through additional studies, it's like, yeah, I still don't to personally see what the issue is, but I guess once you get to a certain place of really being by the letter of your spiritual system, yes, there can be some conflicts, and it just depends on your personal what your personal gut is saying. You know what I'm saying, as far as how you're being led to it. So people decide to do that. God bless you. But for me and mine, that's like I haven't had a problem with that at all. Definitely.
What about you, Baba Buku? Why do you think a lot of people are coming out and renouncing Black Greek letter organizations based on their spiritual leanings?
It's an observation, not a critique. But I think it's just the tide of where we are today. Everything is the extreme hot take, right? There's no room for middle ground. There's no room for exchange. There's only this response. And what does this response get me, right? So again, if that's your road and if that's your conviction, who am I to challenge that? Who knows? But it just really appears that it's just consistent with where we are today. And the pendulum will shift, in a different direction at a different time. But people, something about those cameras, something about that hot take, that's just irresistible to some people, right? Because, and again, I want to be careful with this, but I've seen some of the videos like in preparation for this. And there are things, if you're that specific about, the oath that you took, and there's some things I'm seeing on camera as well, in terms of your choices that would seem to fall in that net that you're casting, right? So, I heard a pastor say this before, and he said, I'm not judging you, but I'm inspecting your fruit. And so what we see, it's just an indication of where we are today. It won't be this way always. Respect to those who are so convicted to the point where they feel that they need to do this publicly. Um, who knows what and who's behind it, but the God of their understanding. And so I support it, but I just don't think it needs to be baby out with the bathwater all the time. And it seems like that's where we've been, not just with this issue, but many issues. I mean, at least 5 years, maybe more.
Yes,
You
sir.
know, I just want to say something about what Baba Joel said. It's interesting enough that I know somebody who mom is an AKA, whose father is a Nupe, and they got caught up in the message of church and was like, yeah, you know, being Greek is satanic. I said, so what about your mama and your daddy? What about, you got some aunts that's deltas? Like, what are we talking about? Like, you got people that you know, like close to you, who raised you, who poured into you. Like, does that pass the sniff test? Like, sometimes we got to apply common sense. I do think it's one of those things where people get caught up in a wave of emotions. We had that at my school, where there was a local church, and a couple people went, and man, that Sunday was hitting, because a couple of them came back and denounced. Man, that pastor was snapping that Sunday. The funny thing is, though, because I'm on social media, I follow a girl who just denounced, and she is the first person that I have ever heard of who actually really denounced. Because no, everybody else is just making statements. She actually did what you're really supposed to do if you're really denouncing it. She wrote a letter, formally denouncing to her organization. And it ain't no coming back from that. Once you do that, like, you done. Like, it ain't no, oh, I'm sorry, I was tripping. It's a wrap. And so she actually, wrote the letter. Another thing that I find interesting in this topic is there was another guy that was on Instagram here recently, and he was like, why it's always us that got to denounce our organization? You don't never hear about Delta Tau Delta or the SIG Eps or none of those people. None of them. You never hear about that. You never hear white people say, I denounce my organization. And I went to a PWI, so we had a joint party with the SIG Eps. I done kicked it with the Delta Tau Delta. They, couple people lived in an apartment next to mine, and we went out there and hung out. So I've experienced how they do their thing. One of my charter members of my fraternity, because my fraternity or my chapter was chartered in '95, he was the president of student government. So, he was real tight through those channels with, I can't remember what theirs was called. Like, I think he was a part of Greek Affairs Council or something like that. But anyway, he was familiar with all of them. And so because of that, our chapter was familiar with a lot of the white fraternities and sororities. But again, you never hear that from them. It seems like these types of things, like Baba Scott was saying, where it's just a sign of the times, the pendulum swings one way or another. But it seems like it's always swings with us. It doesn't swing with anybody else.
So now we can really get to the part of the episode that it seems like everybody's been wanting to get to, and that's the similarities between the Greek organizations and African spirituality. Baba Onifade, you alluded to that earlier, and seeing the similarities in the ritual, and the both of you going into Africa and experiencing those rituals over there, and saying that, okay, this is where this comes from, or this is where that comes from. So Baba Buku talked to us a little bit about the similarities between Greek organizations and the ATRs as you've experienced it.
Well, I want to go into the historical perspective around inception and how these organizations came to be and what they were in response to. And that in itself tells, especially here stateside, I can't speak for the Caribbean or elsewhere in the diaspora, but I think stateside it really tells us about why and how, and because, like we said, I think I said it before, all of these organizations and the way that they came to be, even Prince Hall Masonry, all of it a response to the hypocrisy, duplicity, the foulness, of this nature, and not, of this nation, and not delivering its promise, not delivering its implied potential for us. So when these organizations and the ATRs later, when they come there, this isn't political. It's not just political. It's not just historical. It's anthropology that we're talking about now, in terms of how folks actually in mass move and adapt to things that threaten their viability and well-being, just to move in as human beings. So the first thing that we have, in my opinion, that's useful to look at is Plessy versus Ferguson. So that's 1896. So separate but equal is what we recognize there. So this effectively undoes whatever perceived advantages or progress that there was after Reconstruction. And so now, all of a sudden, you have Black folks trying to move progressively, trying to figure out how we can better our position here. So then you would have folks there was the Niagara movement, some things that happened up in Canada. By this time, all these organizations are starting to form. So 1896, Sigma Pi Phi is probably 05, Alpha's 06. But many of these people who are in these organizations, either Masons already or affiliated in that, so they have this kind of ritual underpinning as well, and also have experience, or at least in philosophy, in being able to advocate for our people. So that was the fraternity response, in my opinion. So the legal aspect of things, the historical aspect of things, but in terms of the ATRs, the thing that brought it forward for us, now we're not just talking about accommodations and representation, but now Brown Board of Education is, I think, what we want to look to in 1954, around 1954, because now we're talking about identity. You might remember that what kind of shifted the pendulum in that civil rights environment was, doctors Mamie and Kenneth Clark with the doll test. Everybody is familiar with the doll test. But this is, again, image, identity, how we feel about ourselves. Again, disenfranchised, lacking representation, lacking the promise that these laws, were either supposed to bring, or some things that were supposed to come after it. And so now with the Black Black nationalist movements and so forth that are all taking place. Again, they all existed before, but something about the 50s now has us looking towards our roots. We've already had certain degree of revolution with regard to arts representation from the continent. So, like your Catherine Dunhams, your Zora Neale Hurston's, who was a Zeta, I believe. So we already got these things kind of, bubbling in terms of images and imagery. And so now it's like, okay, well, let's see what this was like before we tried to get into this, because identity is at the crux, in my opinion, is at the crux of how IFA or ATRs, more so than accommodations or access. Those things are always working in the background. But in my opinion, it's more about identity in that space. But back, in the days when we're talking about Plessy versus Ferguson, the inception of these, fraternal, organizations outside of Masonry, not so much about identity, but more so about access, accommodations, and how we're able to move forward. Again, all of it plays a part, but the emphasis kind of just flipped a little bit. But then after these periods, then you also are now dealing with, how you grow these organizations, these movements, how you deal organizationally with framework, putting things together. What does expansion mean? Who are the members? And I don't want to go too far, but since we mentioned membership, you also look at pretty much homogenous, people of African descent in these organizations. But now you have other folks, you know, you got Europeans joining or wanting to join the organizations. What did this mean? This was created as a response to, the exclusion, discrimination, and all of these things. And now all of a sudden we're faced with membership questions around folks who belong to those groups who were the ones who were excluding us. So the growing pains that happen again, all in response to what I believe, at least, linked to the duplicity, uh, the failure of the nation to actually deliver on, what the promise was, so to speak. And so it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? What's the best way to push our agenda forward based on the needs at that particular time? Sure.
Okay. So, Baba Onifade, talk to us a little bit about the similarities, or in your mind, the similarities between the ATRs and Greek organizations. Talk to us a little bit about what you saw in Africa and what are the similarities in the ritualistic aspect.
Yeah, I mean the main similarity, of course, is just the initiatory process. The actually coming from one state, leaving in another state. Um, I think in looking at those two things and that evolution of that growth in that short period of time that one goes through, it speaks to the lack of rites of passage as we spoke about earlier in our community, and the feeling that you get once you've gone through something and you've seen yourself through to the end of something, even with the spiritual practice. Um, I say a slight difference between the two would be, of course, what are we initiating, how are we initiating, how are we elevating, or how are we evolving. I think, of course, with our Greek letter organizations, it's more of a social explosion or a social arrival that you're having. Even if you go back to stuff like Botillion and Debutante, what I'm saying, all of those being, situations in the African American community where we utilize, as rites of passages. But this time it's like once we stepped into Tafar, what I'm saying? It's like, no, my soul is kind of being reborn, or where I'm standing as a man, what I'm saying, in not just my body and my physicality, but also in my spiritual life. What I'm saying? So that is what was so much stronger about that experience. Also, stepping away from the undercurrent of Christianity, which is so prevalent in most of the organizations that are in the African American community. Um, After I went through my spiritual evolution, um, the people, I, I, I say the organizations that you're a part of usually have some type of subculture that you can agree with the rules and the conduct of. Same like with your line brothers. After you go through the process and you meet a brother in the future, you understand they've been through certain things that were similar to you, and there's a certain um, tenacity that they have, a certain way of going about things because of the process that you can trust, and because of those similar experiences, there are other similarities as far as the character, how we move, and so on and so forth. But when we move out of the realm of Christianity, you can kind of be by yourself. You know what I'm saying? Not saying, as you said, you have a brother that was Muslim as well, but there's a strong undertone of Christianity and that particular faith and spirituality when you're talking about the Masonic Lodge or you're talking about Greek letter organizations, even though it's not specifically enumerated, in the rituals, but it's alluded to enough, in the practices that we do. So, I mean, once I expanded and, you know, yeah, once I had that expansion as far as my spiritual man, um, that was definitely something I was looking for, even in the brotherhood of with other Awos. Now it's not only that we have a cultural identity that keeps us synonymous or in common. We also have the ritual that we've been through, going through, that has us in common, and also, like our rules and our constitution, the things that we do as Awo, that keep us, in this sense of community. That I think the Greek letter organization, that was the intent, what I'm saying, as Scotty alluded to, what I'm saying, at the time in history where we were needed, it was needed for codification, it was needed for collective movement forward. And we have all these things along with the spiritual practice of understanding that not just are our social values aligned, also our spiritual, our communal values, our family values, so many more things are in line. And I think that was a big similarity that I felt, in experiencing that, um, in just seeing that my relationship with my LBs, for example, and I look at the relationship with the different IWO, and I mean it's similar because it's still a brotherhood, but because there's so many more tangible levels that we deal with in the realm of Ifa, as far as because Ifa is just not relegated to one portion of our life. You know what I'm saying? It's our life is how we live our lives as a whole, and so then have that congruency and that relationship with other brothers, it just seems like it's a much tighter bond, very similar, but because of the spiritual aspect, I can say, especially since I've quote unquote changed religions or whatever, um, there's just that underlying congruency of ideology, of methodology, how we go about things, conflict resolution, even. You know what I'm saying? Because we can DAFA. We have a means to. It's not just opinion based. It's not just what old school bros said. You know what I'm saying? That kind of mindset where it's like so many things are passed down. Are they all good? Some things, yes. Some things, maybe not so much so. Some things probably do need to be washed away. You know what I'm saying? But having that standard, that oracle that we can kind of test all of our ideology and all the things that we're talking about and all the things that we're doing against to see if we're in a place of moving forward, congruency, expansion. I believe that is the biggest difference I see because once again, you're expanding, you're growing, you're initiating, you're becoming something new. But just having all those other facets uh, in alignment, I think it just for me is built, a much stronger relationship. I can say even with our versus some of my LVs. Um, yeah, yeah, that's what I would say. Not as verbose. I'm sorry I ain't got my details together like Scott, but that's just I can only speak to my experience, man. That's definitely what I felt.
I think Freemasonry is something that most of us have in common. I was, I think around 2014, maybe 2015, entered and passed in a Freemasonic lodge, never raised. Um, Purple Heart Lodge number 205, beholden to the most worshipful Prince Hall, Grand Lodge of Texas, F and AM. 2014, 2015, maybe. Um, that is one of the organizations that from my experience talking with you guys, talking with Fafore, that seems to be the most similar to Greek organizations. However, in my experience, it seems that the camaraderie and the brotherhood seems to be more solid in the Black Greek organizations than in Freemasonry. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is, Baba Buku, that there's a seems to be more solidarity in those organizations than in Freemasonry?
Well, I think because if we're talking about modern day, right? Because if we're looking at what happened in fraternities, I pledged when I was 18 years old. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know anything about, masonry to the point, so we're talking about a slice of people's lives. Some people say that college can be the best 4 or however many years you stay, but could be the best 4 years of your life. So everything is ripe and new in these situations for somebody who's under 25. So those types of bonds that you're forming are one of a kind, relationships, right? And things that could extend, into our relationships. Me, being in my 50s now, there's some people that I'm, still very close to, based on the relationship that I had with them then. But in masonry, I don't want to generalize. But even like again, going back to Sigma Pi Phi, that organization, again, Greek letter, but not collegiate. It was for accomplished professional individuals. So they've already had their experiences. This is now about something else. It's the networking and how we can galvanize and move the way that we need to move, whatever you accept agree or disagree about the philosophy. That's what it was about. Respectfully said, again, I'm not a Mason. Respectfully said, seems like it's more about, it can be obviously social, but I mean, most people have moved through certain stages in their lives where, the service aspect of it, the networking aspect of it, the elevation aspect of it is more what they're looking towards. I'm not saying it's coming across as no new friends, but we're just at different slices, in our lives when we connect with these organizations. I wanted to go somewhere else, but I'll wait back because that might be, might be your next question.
So why do you think that is, Baba Onifade? That the solidarity seems to be more solid in the Black Greek letter organizations than in Freemasonry. You being a Freemason yourself, do you find that to be the case, and if so, why?
Uh, I literally have to agree with Scott as far as that, as far as the time period. I can even say in those 2 years between me joining Omega Psi Phi at 19 versus me joining the lodge at 21, I was on a much more personalized journey. So I was looking more, one, the family, I have, like I said, my great grandfather. I have worshipful master aprons from like multiple generations. So one, fulfilling that kind of part of a family legacy, but it was really me understanding the philosophy, the mindset, and because I had gone through Omega, I think I had a better perspective as far as like what am I really here to do. I mean, even in going through the Omega process, it was more or less about I dare say survival. Make it through more so through with my Masonic process, it was more about really elevating myself mentally, really understanding the concepts, the philosophies, more so I'd say than with Omega. With the solidarity part, I think it was because of literally that we were there grinding hard together versus it being grown men who make a choice to collectively come together to build themselves and elevate themselves even more. Um, and also just the process itself. I think the process of pledging lends more to that kind of bond being because it's a much more elongated process. You spend a lot more time together in comparison to the Masonic Lodge. 'Cause I mean, you build a brotherhood, but in most cases, most people are not that young. It can be a mixture of line. I remember my initial line with the Masonic Lodge is I was the youngest at 21, but the oldest might have been, in his late 40s, early 50s. Versus with Omega, literally all of us were within a, 3, 4, 5 year span of time. And the social implications of being, collectively codified on a campus because, it's an identity that you carry with you on that campus. And so even and how you're treated, from other people because you're associated with the ideal, not so much with masonry because as you probably say, it's masons everywhere. And there's really nothing unless they let you know they're a mason or they have an insignia that will let you know the information versus on the college campus, even if you're not wearing your letters, everybody knows who you are and who you're with. And so I think just that lifestyle of finding yourself in the midst of the image of the organization, if you want to sell into that image or not, especially at that influential time, as I said, me being so young, it allows you to delve more into that personification of the ideal, and in that, we carry that more. Um, Even as you meet brothers that are older out in life, because we've had that experience, we have that energy because of that time, and there tends to be more of a cohesiveness versus the much more diverse array of people, even that you would meet in the Masonic Lodge. You know what I'm saying? Because the difference of also, college educated people, people going through school versus people from all walks of life in the Masonic Lodge. You know what I'm saying? It's definitely in itself a different experience. I think that lends to that end result of more camaraderie or not.
So I'm gonna say in my experience, I definitely agree with Baba Joel. It's something about that pledging process that Masonry can't duplicate, at least the way in which it's traditionally, the initiation is traditionally handled. They can't mimic that. And that is what helps, for me, galvanize my relationship with not only the people that I pledged with, but fraternity brothers who was a part of that, or even brothers who I know have the same experience. I can meet them. They could be way on the other side of the country. One thing where Masonry went wrong for me is, you know how they say in boxing, styles make fights, and you make the other boxer fight your style and you don't fight their style. Masonry has allowed this modernization and social media in them to kind of trick them out of their niche. And they went from a prestigious organization that was the keepers of this ancient knowledge. And they allowed themselves to be tricked out of that position to come down to wanting to be a fraternity, right? Like a Greek college fraternity. And when Osuen, when you and I got to our lives, that's what I saw. Like that's literally what they would say. Oh, I don't get into the esoterics. This is just a fraternity. I was like, well, I'm already a member of one of those. And so you can't compete with that on this level. But if you got what I think you got, this ancient knowledge that I'm trying to expand, grow, and evolve, if you got that, I'm with it. And when it was evident that that's not what was being taught, it was, that's when Masonry started to lose its appeal for me, And so if they get back to that, then they can go back to being a very prosperous, abundant, and relevant organization. Now, I don't know if what we call the white lodges or what's it called? Mainstream Masonry. I'm not sure if they are having that same kind of issue where they're trying to mimic something else, or if they're staying with the traditional aspect of Masonry. That I couldn't tell you. But at least in Prince Hall Masonry that I've seen, that is one of the issues for me, to where you don't have the same type of relationships in Masonry than you do in Black Greek Letter organizations, or at least the collegiate Black Greek Letter organization. Baba Scott, you had something that you wanted to offer, but you didn't know if we were going to touch on it. Please share that with the family.
So, I mean, a couple of things. We touched around it, but I guess we didn't really name it specifically. And that is that both of them, both ATRs, and Black Greek Letter organizations have a Kemetic origin. Although, in some ways once removed, if you look at the membership of most of the Black Greek Letter organizations, again, there's Masons and Masonry all through it. With respect, to the rituals and everything else, we won't go into detail with that. But you can see the through line, between what those rituals are and what the fraternal rituals are, and it's all Kemetic. The migratory happenings, of course, our own Luo, Baba Femi talks about the Kemetic root of Ifa and all of the ATRs, having that Kemetic origin due to some migratory happenings, over history. But even with, just the certain archetypes, Egbe aspect, if you will, about what, like every fraternity has kind of, a brand, so to speak. There's like the constructive brand and the less constructive brand. We know what those avatars are, right? For everyone. Also, but we all essentially do the same thing. But it's just like in like for you got E5, you got the Orisha and the Akan tradition. You got a Basom. You go through the laws and all the in Udon. It's like it's really not that much of a difference, except for some of the specifics. But just the way that people kind of gravitate, just the way you see Shango's at a Bembe, you know how that's going to be, right? If you see, you already know. So cues that they're going to be a certain way, alphas a certain way or not, right? It just depends on. But it all speaks to kind of that common thread of DNA. It's like we all recognize the value of whether we are thinking about it or not. We all recognize the value and the need for community, the value and the need to connect around certain, common beliefs, practices, characteristics. It's the reason why we have what I call sometimes bastardized rituals in our community, right? We talked about it before about these organizations being, rites of, representing rites of passage because we just didn't have those things. But the bastardized rites of passages, are the things that put us in difficult situations. It's like, oh, first time you knocked her off, and blah blah blah. You committed this crime. Like those become the rites of passage when we're not able to identify. But there's still something inside of us knows that there has to be a line of demarcation between where we were and where we're going. Right. But also, yeah. But it follows the line. You got venerated elders. In our traditions, ATRs, you have them in the fraternity as well. There are quote unquote holy places. There's titles. There's like all there's really very little conceptually. With the exception of how you get from one place to another in that alchemical process. They're really a lot more similar than a lot of people would ever imagine.
Ashe. One last thing I think about that's important in both ATRs and in Black Greek letter organizations, even in Masonry, is the aspect of secrecy. We know Awo means secret. One of the first things that we are taught during the initiation process is secrecy. I think that's something that if you're just learning that concept, once you come into African spirituality, you might miss the boat. You know what I'm saying? For some people, it might have been too late. So I think it was good to really have that understanding as a young man. These organizational structures, when you go back to Ifa and the villages of Nigeria and how it's set up, you got, different societies and things of that nature. When you have come into a fraternity and you have positions and you know how to run a meeting and things of that nature, the organization inside of the organization sets you up to be able to be a part of, an ATR and how that's run. Again, if you're just learning that, once you got your hand of E5 or you got initiated as a priest at 40, you're kind of, behind the 8 ball on that. Not saying that you can't learn it some other way, but for those people who have been through that process in college, you absolutely know that they understand it and they know it and they've been through it. So those are some things that are important. Being a part of a fraternity has been a great experience for me. Kappa Alpha Psi has a lot of memories. I have lifelong relationships, and I am forever grateful to Masonry, because without Masonry, I might not know Osuen. So I am very, very grateful. I remember telling Osuen early on, once we kind of saw that maybe the lodge wasn't going to be the place that we were going to get the information that we were looking for. I remember looking at him and saying, "Hey, I already got what I came. I already got my money's worth once I met you, and I stand by that." So, you know, it was well worth it. Man, we want to say thank you. We greatly appreciate, you know, you guys coming on and sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your gifts and talents. This was everything that Osuen and myself knew it was going to be. You know, we knew you guys were going to come and y'all was going to bring it home. And we thoroughly appreciate and thank you for what you've done and being a part of it. Family, thank you again for you know, stopping by and sitting with us for another episode. We greatly appreciate y'all for checking in. You know, thank y'all for stopping by with the Who Made Yall Priests podcast. You know, whether you're religious or spiritual or you just don't know what to believe, you will always have a safe space here with us, because if somebody made us priests, that means it's going to be hope for you too. So we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. And we'll check y'all out next time. Peace.